Welcome to BAM, Badass Moms with Lori and Jenny. We are moms on a mission to share women's stories about life, fitness, aging, relationships, travel, and much more. Hello, friends, and thanks for listening. I just wanted to take a second to give you a quick reminder about subscribing to the show. If you have not already, just take a moment and do so. This will make sure that you never miss a daily bite or an upcoming episode. And in addition to that, if you have a few extra moments and like to drop us a review, we'd really appreciate it. And there's also a sponsor of the show located at the bottom of all of our episodes. Once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for being badass. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us on another episode of The BAM. Today, we are so excited to welcome Sage Rountree to the show. Sage has a background in being an athlete, training athletes in the wellness industry. Also, she has a yoga studio. She's an author of working on over 10 books now. We're going to talk about some of those specifically today. She's a mom to two grown children now in their 20s. I don't know if children are ever really grown anyways, but anyways, we are so excited to have you on the show. Welcome, Sage.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat with y'all.
Yay!
Yes, thanks so much for being here. Yeah, Lori and I, we mentioned this a little bit before we all hopped on camera, before we went live, but Sage has written over 10 books, is currently working on your 11th, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's all about, yoga, mindfulness, how to translate being an athlete into, doing things that will complement that through yoga practices. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how did you get from this athlete and through this period of having to calm down and move into more of an intentional yoga practice?
Well, my yoga origin story is probably like many people's, where I hated the first class I went to. I found it really humbling and challenging. It looked like it would be easy, and it wasn't. So I was so put off that I was going to put off of yoga for a while until I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now 23. And my best friend lived down the street. She was also pregnant. We went to prenatal yoga together and just had a great time. And that kind of turned me on to the ways that yoga could give me a sense of connection. I had this baby inside my body. I was primed for the connection that yoga offers. And then after Lily was born, I started running more and was training for a marathon and realized things were kind of hurting because I was always either nursing my baby or working or sleeping or running. So I thought, I felt good when I went to prenatal yoga. So I got back into yoga and really started to see how yoga and the work that I was doing in my training were complementary to each other. And at that point, I thought, okay, there's really something in this. So when I was pregnant with my younger daughter, I thought, that's it. I'm going to be a yoga teacher. And really kind of had these two twin threads intertwined as I got more serious about each of them, which was pretty nice. But at the same time, I wasn't thinking that I would make a career at the intersection of yoga and endurance sports. I was in graduate school. I have a PhD in English literature, so I was working on that. And then I went into academic publishing, so I was working on that, and eventually just had the privilege of being able to turn full-time to that intersection between yoga and endurance sports and to work in the wellness industry, as you say.
So I love that. So as an endurance athlete, I personally, I have always found it hard to kind of slow down, and yoga, kind of like you spoke about, I'm still hoping that I can find that love in my life, because it's really, as you know, I think until you really embrace it, it's tough, I think, sometimes for endurance people to be to just shut their brain down, shut their bodies down, and just relax. Did you find it was kind of challenging at first, like you said, and it took a little bit to kind of see that benefit of it?
Definitely. The way that I like to put it is that athletes in general, but endurance athletes in particular, we're used to going into the pain cave. We have comfort with discomfort, and we're used to, being on that upper edge and really pushing the limits and using the tools that we develop out on the trail or the road to keep ourselves focused as things get intense. Well, yoga has a lot to say about ways that you can stay focused as things get intense as well. But it also gives us a chance to be at the other edge, not that upper edge, the edge of where you're about to lose it up top, but way down at the lower edge, like the edge of consciousness. And the good thing about spending time at that edge is that if you fall off, you don't get injured or, blow up out in the middle of a race. You just fall asleep and like, oh, you relaxed too hard. Boo-hoo.
Right.
But so I like to describe that as being comfortable with being comfortable. So we already have this comfort with discomfort, and many of us need to work on our comfort with comfort, and to be okay just being okay, and to be okay just being and not always doing. And yoga gives us so many different paths up that mountain of being still, of being calm, of being quiet. And along the way, we still get these tools to maintain our focus and presence, no matter what's happening, if we're racing or if we're parenting, if we're working, if we're sleeping.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that struck me as you were telling that story is it was actually a former guest who's a dancer, a former guest we had on the show, Elizabeth Marbury. She's a dancer. She teaches dance lessons and has a dance studio. And I took a dance class from her. And I'm used to lifting weights, running, biking, like all those kinds of things where the movements, they're forceful, intentional, and dance and yoga are more flow, right? And she gave me the feedback, and I was laughing so hard because she's like, you just need to let your body go. Because everything I did was like very structured and very,
Control.
And I'm like, everything I've done in my life has been to do the opposite of let my body go. Right.
Yeah.
So how do you coach people to let that go?
Well, it's tough. It requires a little bit of trickery. You give them, like the athlete in the context of a yoga class, you give them an opportunity to do some work, to push their limits a little bit, maybe even to show off at the things that athletes are capable of that maybe other people in a yoga class might find very challenging. Athletes can find super easy. I will never forget, I worked for years and still work with some of the players with the UNC football team. I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Yeah. And once I was there in the locker room, had them in crow pose because, athletes can do crow pose, especially 20-year-old men who play football. They can do crow pose. And it makes them feel like they're good at yoga. Yeah. And then you can put them in the things that are harder. But I had them in crow pose. And one guy said, basically, hey, y'all, watch this. And pushed up from crow pose into handstand and started walking around the locker room on his hands.
My God. Yeah.
And we were all like, that's cool, bro. And then we just got down to the harder stuff, which for them is pigeon or hamstring stretches or just lying there. Although the football team was really into just lying there. They would come in, I would see them the day after, I would see them on Sundays, the day after games on Saturdays, and they would come in. And if it was a rough game or a late game, they would say, can we just do breath exercises and just kind of plop down on the floor in the locker room?
That's perfect.
So it may be easier for some athletes to relax than you think. I find, especially the student athletes I work with, are so wiped out. They're really overextended, and they'll take any opportunity they can get to do legs up the wall or shavasana or just hang out.
Yes.
So I definitely want to talk about your book because it kind of goes along with what we're chatting about now, Athlete's Guide to Recovery. But before we go down that path, I want to talk about, so you do own your own yoga facility, which I want to know how that kind of started and, anything specific or unique that you guys do at your practice.
Sure. It's called Carver Yoga Company. Carver is the little town adjacent to Chapel Hill, where I actually live. And the overarching brand is Carolina Yoga Company. And at one point over the last 20 years of our existence, we had 3 locations, one in Durham and one in Hillsborough, which is our little town, our county seat up the road. But the pandemic kind of helped us contract back. I guess they call it right sizing.
Yeah.
It's working out just fine. But the Hillsborough studio is now a spa, which I also co-own with my business partner in the yoga studio. So we've got this mini wellness empire. I started teaching at the studio when my friend opened it in 2004. So I've been teaching that same class for 20 years now, a little bit over 20 years, yoga for athletes. I call it now yoga for athletic balance. And so that's certainly one angle that we have as a studio. My business partner and and I took the studio over in 2010 when the original founder moved to the West Coast. And we specialize in like yoga for real people. It's not hot. It's room temperature yoga. It's not showy or fancy. It's not especially Instagrammable. It's yoga for the community and especially for the tight and tired people in the community. So tight and tired is an umbrella that encompasses athletes, but also moms and just basically anybody who would walk in off the street is probably tight and tired.
That's perfect. Well, I that's the thing that's funny is like you were talking about the athletes that can do like handstand or crow or whatever. And I always get excited when they're like, okay, do headstand. And I'm like, yay, I can do something like that's hard work for me. But
that's impressive, Jenny. Headstand?
Well, not handstand, headstand. It's very different. But I'll tell you, I can't touch my toes. Like that, those are the extremes.
And it shouldn't matter, right? I mean, like, are the yoga police coming to check on you that you're performing your toe touching exercises, exactly up to spec? No.
Yeah.
So owning your studio, you were able to then continue to obviously do your other passions, which are be a trainer to other athletes and a coach, and to also start writing all these wonderful books that you've written. So let's talk about your most current book.
Well, I have two that just came out within a week of each other. Books drop on Tuesdays, like albums, within a week of each other in March and April. So the one that I think you're asking about, Lori, is The Athlete's Guide to Recovery, the second edition. The other one is a book specifically for yoga teachers and maybe also for practitioners that want to work on their own practice called The Art of Yoga Sequencing. I have several resources for yoga teachers and run a teacher training and do continuing education for teachers. But the Athlete's Guide to Recovery is a book that I first wrote, I think the first edition published in 2011 or 2012. And this is a second edition that's been revised and updated because plenty has changed in the field of recovery. I mean, back more than a decade ago, the concept of recovery was pretty foreign to people. And now there are recovery labs where you can go and get passively stretched. It's like the most actively passive thing I can think about. So I review what's changed in the literature, but also just most generally what athletes or more broadly, tight and tired people can do to enhance their ability to integrate the work that they choose to do and also the stresses that life puts on them. Because all of that combines to control your ability to perform. And if you only ever worked out and never rested or didn't pay attention to your sleep or some of the other things that you can be doing to encourage your body to adapt to the stresses that you put on, you're just going to create a negative trend for yourself. And eventually you're going to get sick or injured or burnt out mentally. But if you can pay good attention to the very, very basic and also very, very free things that you should be doing to take care of your body, then you are setting yourself up for an upward trend and for peak performance. So just to spoil the book for you. And I said, very basic, very free. It's not sexy. I know going to the recovery lab sounds sexy. Or going in like the cryotherapy chamber, really sexy. Ice baths, very glamorous and sexy, right? No, the best thing that you can do for your recovery is sleep. And that's not so Instagrammable. I mean, maybe in a certain subsegment, kinky subsegment. But, people aren't putting up pictures of themselves sleeping.
That's true. I don't think maybe we should. We should start like a whole thread on sleep. That's it. So do you have any interesting like tips and tricks for people to really get those solid night sleeps? I feel like with all the things going on in the world, obviously yoga is a helpful, tool for that, but how to really help people just decompress and disconnect? Like, do you have any kind of tips?
I think it's pretty individual. There are some very basic things that, every article that you've read about sleep hygiene has told you the room should be comfortably cool, not cold, but cooler maybe than you might already have it. Dark, buying blackout blinds is probably a really good use if you wanted to spend money to improve your recovery. Your bed should be really comfortable. So that's another really good use of your recovery budget is to upgrade your mattress or your pillows, your pajamas. I mean, all of that is really good. Being careful not to be on screens too late in the night, trying to make your bedroom into a sanctuary so that you don't take phone calls in your bedroom and you don't sit in your bed and watch Netflix. So that the bedroom is an area that is really designed for restoration, for sleep, and not much else is also really useful. But beyond that, it's really unique to the individual. I mean, if drinking chamomile tea makes you sleep better, great. If you'd rather have warm milk, great. If you'd rather just sit and read a book in your living room, great. If you want to do a guided meditation, great. If you want to do yoga nidra, which is like a guided meditation that is kind of approximating the sleep state, great. It's just all this very basic stuff that you've known, and it's just tough to do.
It's doing it, right?
Yeah, we need to have like an Instagram sleep challenge.
Yeah, totally. Well,
Yeah.
maybe we'll start it.
Yeah.
So what about rest days? I find that the more I read about, especially aging athletes, the more they say you need to have rest days because, I mean, I don't know. I think, Lori, you're in the same boat. We enjoy being active so much that it's actually hard to have a rest day. And when I was training for my last marathon, my coach was like, I want you to have 2 days where you're lazy. He's like you can walk around and stuff like that, but I want you to be lazy. That was probably the hardest part of the whole training program for me.
But did it work well?
Yeah, it did. But I was like, it would, to your point, like being comfortable being comfortable. Like that was so hard for me.
It's like the mental battle, right? Like you're trying to like tell yourself you need to rest, but your mind's like, no, I can't rest because if I'm resting, I'm not getting better. But you really are getting better by resting.
Right. It helps to understand some of the physiology at play. When you spend time in health and wellness circles, you hear kind of about how we don't want to be in the kind of mushy middle. We need to have high highs and we need to have low lows so our bodies can adapt better. And that's why the 2 rest days is really solid programming for your body. I know it's tough for your mind because it's human nature. We want to control the controllables, right?
Yeah.
And we're not so good at just dealing with the uncontrollables or letting time, which is the number one recovery tool, letting time bring your body back up to the baseline and ideally above the baseline of where you were before you did the previous hard workout. So if we're always trying to wedge a little bit more into the day, we can't go as high on the hard days.
Okay.
And we kind of sacrifice the low days. So if you're like, I still want to do a run, well, now that low day has come here, but then you're tired for the next hard day and you don't get quite as high and you wind up in this middle of mediocrity, which is probably not where you wanted to be when you signed up for the race, or especially when you signed up for the coaching. And that's why we pay coaches to tell us to do less. Often it's a work of taking stuff out. But you're right, Jenny, as we age, we probably need to put even more rest days in. Let's say for folks on the far side of 40, maybe 2 is totally solid. But the good news is that as masters athletes, we have this wealth of experience behind us. I've certainly found in coaching, I had 2 athletes that I coached to the World Duathlon Age Group Championships almost the same year, maybe 2 years kind of next to each other. And one of them was in her 50s and one of them was in his early 20s. And while they wound up, performing really well at the same event, Travis, the young guy, was doing a ton of work, so much work. Duathlon is a lot of work anyway. I think that's about as hard as it gets. And then Julie was doing way less, but Julie ran track in college and Julie had, 40 years of racing experience in her aging body. And so she had the mental fortitude and just the grit and the guts to pull it out when she needed to, whereas Travis didn't even know what he was capable of, and he needed the higher training volume in order to learn that for himself. And he was just capable of adapting. I mean, robust young guy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So throughout your kind of, history of running your yoga studio, training athletes, writing books, you raised 2 wonderful children, which are now young adults. Let's talk about how they helped kind of mold who you are now and how they're currently doing on their own paths.
They're fantastic. My older daughter is in graduate school at the University of Michigan. She is studying biostatistics, which is exactly what her dad does. So shout out to him. He has been a fantastic partner to me for 28 years now. And he had a lot to do with, their creation, but also with modeling like good partnership and parenting, because he did a whole lot when they were young, because the work that I was doing, taking yoga workshops, teaching yoga workshops, racing, and then coaching athletes who are racing, a lot of that happens over the course of a weekend. And he works the 9-to-5 job that provides a whole lot of income for our family and our insurance, and kind of covers all of the bases. So then I got the chance to play and kind of do the fun stuff and be the side gigger. So respect to him. He's fantastic. But Lily is following in his footsteps to study biostats. And she, in high school, decided that she was going to start coming to the yoga studio with me. So she would come to Pilates mostly. And then in college got into yoga and now is kind of back on the Pilates swing up in Ann Arbor. So it's been really cool to see her kind of following into that path. And then Vivian is a junior at UC Davis out in California. And she I used to drag to yoga. And I realize now that probably wasn't the play. So, especially when it's your mom's studio and you can just walk out and go sit in the office instead. Yeah. So I should have learned my lesson, like let Lily come to it and then tried to make Vivi come to it. It didn't work out quite so well, but she's a great kid.
It's hard to like take a step back, right? And let them figure it out for themselves because I mean, I find that I've got two daughters that are adult daughters too. So I have a 21 and an 18-year-old. So one who just graduated college, one who just graduated high school. The one who graduated college has moved out, and then the younger one will be leaving in the fall to go to college out of state. And it's like, when you love something, you want everybody you love to love something, like to do it with you and to love it too. And especially being a mom and a daughter, it's like the more you push them, the more they resist. So I have to hope that someday they'll come to it on their own. Right.
Yes, Jenny, it's a whole lot like what we were saying about, like, we want to control the things that we can control, but a lot of what we need to do is the letting go. And I did come to realize I just need to keep my freaking mouth shut. And I don't need to comment on the outfit, and I don't need to comment on the makeup, and I don't need to say, if you're wondering, how to make your butt look better, you could do some squats and lunges. Just zip it until I'm asked. Like, I was literally asked by the younger one, how did I make my butt bigger? Like, girl, my time I know, it's shine.
They all want their butt bigger. I'm like, we wanted ours smaller.
I know.
This morning I was on a run with my two girlfriends, and we cover all the things, every topic under the sun. And we were talking about that. I'm like, one of the questions that we're trying to ask ourselves is, before we say anything, did they ask for your advice?
Right.
If they did not ask for your advice, try to keep your mouth shut.
It's so hard though. So hard.
It's so hard, but we can all take a lesson from like the Buddhist approach, which is to ask yourself, put the gates of speech. Is it true? Is it necessary? Because often it's totally true, but it's not necessary. Is it kind? You might think you're saying it kindly, but our daughters do not hear it in the same way. We were daughters too. We know how that goes. And then also like, am I the right person to say this? And is this the right time for it? And that's another place where we can get hung up as mothers. I know.
I love it. And I've said those things, it's funny, giving advice to somebody else is so different than like, because you have emotional investment in your kids, right? So I'm like, I know I'm supposed to let them, but I see them going down the wrong path,
I know.
So did your daughters have a good relationship growing up? Were they very different in their interests, or did they kind of,
Yes, they are quite different. And like, we've kind of got the classic first and second child, I think, like the super type A overachiever, Ivy Leaguer, straight to PhD program, and then the more artistic kid. And I think that actually is good, that some of the competition that could have been there wasn't there, because Lily's strengths were hyper academic and Vivi's strengths were more artistic. So that's good. But, they would gripe at each other, and then they also really love each other. So yeah.
How is it having them both out of state?
It's great. I love it. It has just started in the fall of 2019. Lily went off to college, and Vivi went away for art school. So like, she was a junior in high school, but then the pandemic hit and we had them all back. And that first time that they left the nest, I was like, it hit me harder than I thought. I also got it a little prematurely because I had, a kid at boarding school instead of making it to 18. But I was like, what do I do with all this time? Which was crazy. But then we had this huge boomerang. All of society had this boomerang, and we were together to the point where when they finally got to go back and out into the world, I was like, thank God, like, live your life. I don't want you to be confined to our admittedly very comfortable house in our very sweet town. I want you to go. because that's where the world is. It's not at home. It's out there. It's in New York, and it's in Michigan, and it's in California. It's not in sleepy little Chapel Hill.
And that's what they need, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, yes, I'm going to miss you, but this is what you need. Like, I don't want you staying here, you know?
Exactly.
So,
So Sage, what are you currently doing? So you're not competing anymore, but what are your still, like, what do you love to do when you're not doing all these other things for you, for kind of your fix of, doing your favorite things, being cycling, running, events?
Yeah. I love to go out in the woods. We live really near a big forested area with almost 30 miles of trails. So I go in the woods every day. We are in that special zone with the 13-year cicadas. So in the last 3 or 4 weeks, it's just been wild to be in the woods. Like there's this constant siren, ray gun, alien spaceship sound. It's very cool. So that's been a special treat so far this year. I'm up here at our mountain place. I love to go hiking on the trails up here. I do a lot of Pilates, do a lot of yoga, clearly. But really, I love to go to the spa because as a spa owner, I get to call it research.
Oh, yeah.
I've really upped my tolerance for like how many spa treatments I can have in a day. On my 50th birthday, a couple of years ago, I had a 2-morning body treatment, a 2-hour body treatment in the morning, and then a 2-hour facial in the afternoon. It's like, yes.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
Really, like that is an endurance event.
Yes.
I like that endurance event.
I can relax so hard.
What's your favorite treatment?
I'd probably, if I could only choose one, it would be to do facials, because in a facial, there's none of that, like, oh no, she's about to get to my calf that has that knot in it. Like there's no, unless you're getting extractions, there's no like moment. Yeah. And you can always say no to extractions. Any facialist is happy to skip them if you don't want them. But you get all these different textures and smells, and it's just relaxing. And plus you look good. Like after a massage, you look a little puffy because your face is in the cradle and your hair is all wild. After a facial, you're good to go.
That's great.
So I have a question about injuries, right? So I think any person that's constantly moving their body suffers, some form of, like you're talking about, like aches and pains. Have you ever suffered, endured any kind of really big setbacks physically? And how did you overcome those?
If you want to see how good you can be, you have to go all the way up to your edge. And the only way to see that is to sometimes go to the other side of it. And on the other side is where injuries live. Then again, like sometimes people are just clumsy and they injure themselves as well. So my Achilles heel has been not my Achilles, but my ankles. And that's why I don't run anymore. I only walk, because my ankles had gotten pretty arthritic after being rolled so many times out on the trails. Once I had a roll that didn't heal very quickly. And eventually I went to the walk-in ortho and got an x-ray, and I sat for like 90 minutes. And then the nurse came in and she said, sorry that took so long. We had to have a long chat with the radiologist because there are several fractures here and not all of them are new.
No.
Interesting. And I'm lucky because I work with the teens at Carolina, and for several years had for over a decade had our basketball coach as my private client. He said, come talk to the trainer. And he's kind of a specialist in ankles. And he explained, a lot of the nerves that tell you, like they bring you feedback from what's happening in your foot. Of course they run through your ankle, but when you have overstretched those ligaments so many times, you're just not going to get the same feedback. And it's like, I just kind of had abandoned integrity in my ankles, but walking is great and walking doesn't bother. But in the last few days of my running, it's like if I ran in the morning and then I sat down at my desk and then tried to get up and like walk over to the sink to get a cup of water, I would be like hobbled. Like there was so much inflammation in there. So that's what drove me out of running entirely. But younger, I had a stress fracture. I had plantar fasciitis. I think most of my stuff has been really lower body stuff. But of course, any athlete who has tried to do their best has probably got a litany of injuries to describe.
Yeah, for sure.
And how did you said you were a marathon runner. How many marathons did you do?
6, I think, including Boston. Like my career pinnacle, I think, was requalifying for Boston at Boston.
Okay. Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was a good day. And then I never went back. I was like, I'm not going to use that requal. It doesn't get better than that.
How do you qualify? I'm not a runner. Maybe Jenny knows the answer, but how do you qualify to like redo the Boston? Is there a certain time or?
Yes, times, and they get harder every year. They about every 5 or 10 years, they ratchet it up a little bit higher. And then you need to not only make the qualifying time, but based on the number of people that are trying to run the race in any year who do come in under that qualifying time, they add like a little cushion. So you needed to be 90 seconds under, or you needed to be 2 minutes under the qualifying time because there were so many people who wanted to run it.
So you can think you qualified for like several months actually, and then find out that you no longer qualified. So it's pretty competitive. Yeah. I have never even considered that will be me qualifying for Boston. I'm just not. And I'm honestly like more cautious I'd rather run for the long term than be fast. So,
amen.
But I did go get new shoes like a couple of weeks ago, and the man that he owns a running store in Boulder, and he's very well versed with running and athletes, and he also does physical. He's a physical therapist, and he said to me, he's like, I recommend giving up the marathons. He goes, they're so hard on your body, and he did a ton of them. He's like, they're so hard on your body. He goes, I only do halves now, and that's on occasion. He goes, but I run 3 times a week, 1 hour every time I run, and that's what I do now. And I was like, I'm not saying give up marathons if you love marathons, but for me, I'm like, that might not be a bad idea because I've had more injuries the last several years. So it's like, then you have downtime, and I don't want to spend my time down.
Right. It's for the long haul.
Do something else that complements.
Right.
Go to the gym, do strength training, do yoga, do Pilates. Yeah.
And isn't that funny how that really kind of that mindset changes with age? I think when you're younger and you're all in something, that's all you do. But as you get older, you start to realize like, wow, I want to continue to be able to run. So I'm going to mix some yoga, mix some strength training. So I can do all of those things forever, as opposed to just running every day 6 miles and burning yourself out. Right. And really, succumbing to those injuries. So I definitely think it's interesting to see that mindset, how, you get older and you really do have to think about those injuries. You feel those injuries and you're like, wow, I probably shouldn't do X amount of this because it's going to cause me to feel, pretty much like shit the next day. So Sage, let's talk about, you've done a lot of really awesome things. What are you most proud of, and what are you looking forward to coming up?
I am proud of my books because I had started on this academic track and I was trained to do some really specific things. I was trained to be a classroom teacher. I was trained to publish or perish, right? And I was trained to serve on committees, and I wound up taking all of that stuff that I had thought I would do as an English professor and just transferring it to this intersection of yoga and endurance sports in interesting ways. So I've got these books. I did my publisher perish, probably wound up writing a lot more books as a nonfiction / self-help writer than I ever would have as an academic. I sat on the board of Runner's World for 10 years. So again, that's the kind of committee service that you would have done as an academic. I teach classrooms, I train teachers, but I don't have to write grades. I don't have to grade people's essays. It's fantastic. If I look out and my classroom is full of people asleep, that means I'm doing my job well instead of failing as a teacher. So I'm really pleased that I was able to take that training and apply it to a different field that helps people relax, because I think everybody does better when the whole world is slightly more relaxed than it naturally tries to be. I'm looking forward to this new project that my business partner and I have been working on. It's a guided at-home online yoga and wellness retreat. As spa owners and studio owners, like I said, I do a lot of spa research. I do though, and I go to Cleaning Ranch and go off on retreat and see what the setup is at places like that, where you might wind up spending $3,000 or $4,000 for a week. We can do all that at home. And my business partner did. Eventually she was thinking, I want to go to this retreat center. And then she's like, hey, wait, I own a yoga studio. I own a spa. I know exactly what I should be doing, why? And she's German. So she's like, I could do this myself. I just need to set the rules. And she did. She set the parameters for herself and does like about every quarter these self retreats at home where she says, I'm going to come to yoga every other day. I'm going to go to the spa every third day or so and get a treatment. Every day I'm going to give myself some kind of non-food, non-alcohol related treat. Like I'll have a pedicure or I'll watch a stand-up comedy special on Netflix or, just something that is sweet and fun for her. I'll go to the museum. So our project is like walking the client through every step of this, sending you everything you need to do this at home, including yoga to do, meditation to do, some readings to do, some self-assessments to do, some reflections to do. It's called 2 weeks to transformation. And we're running our first cohort right now. And the next one will happen later in the summer. It's just, I love it as a project. I love projects like this.
It's awesome. Really I looked, I think you have a teaser video and I watched it. It's awesome. I mean, I think to your point, making it accessible to everyone. I mean, it truly makes it accessible to everyone. Yeah. You can do it like you can do a little staycation. You can, I just think that it's such, when you think about like workplace stress and burnout and all of those things, if you can incorporate these things into your life and just take these little breaks and create that space and that time and intention for yourself, we could see a real big shift.
Yeah, it's definitely tied into the recovery book. It's about that letting go and that undoing. So if your listeners want to come to my website and poke around, they'll find that there's a mini course version. It's called 2 Days to Transformation. And the first day is about letting go, like setting something down that you're tired of carrying around or tired of worrying about. And we give you a lot of different exercises that you could do to let go, to make space. And then now that you have that space, day 2 of 2 Days to Transformation is, all right, what am I going to do with this space? And maybe the answer is nothing. I just needed to make the space. And maybe the answer is, oh, I'm going to sign up for something or take a cooking class or go ahead and commit to 2 weeks to transformation or whatever it is. So there's like a shunting off and then a picking up that happens really sweetly in a 2-day weekend, but could happen on any 2 days. It's great to take with you. Like you said, you can take it on a staycation. You can take it on a vacation. You can take it to Canyon Ranch with you if you want. Yeah. But, you don't have to spend a ton of money or, be completely outside of your life in order to give yourself this kind of self-care that is actually a service to everybody around you. It can happen at home.
Yeah. So Sage, can you tell our listeners your website and how they can, contact you and reach out?
Sure. So, I didn't say this to y'all, and I was on a podcast. I did an interview a couple of weeks ago with a yoga teacher, and he's like, oh, that really is your name. I thought it was just the name that you chose for yourself, Sage Rountree. And he said, I have to admit, I had all kinds of assumptions about you and the kind of yoga you would teach based on your name. Sage, I got from my parents. Roundtree, I got from my husband. But it's sagerountree.com. And there's technically no D in Roundtree. It comes from Rowantree. It's an English name, but it is spelled with a U, Rountree. So sagerountree.com. I'm also at Sage Rountree across all the socials. And you can come and learn about these at-home retreats, take the mini course, and maybe join us on the 2-week version.
I would love to just put a plug in, and I think you do a little bit of this, but corporate wellness. Yeah. I mean, corporations need this for their employees. Yeah. And so if there's, I did corporate wellness and HR for years in the corporate setting, and these are the things that they should be investing in right now.
I love it. Yeah. Great idea.
Well, thank you, Sage. So wonderful to hear about your journey and all the amazing stuff you're doing for, athletes and getting them to, take a step back and take a breath. Right. And really,
thanks, Lori.
It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks. It was great to chat with y'all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.